If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the January the 20th, 2026 edition of the Counter Racist Code Show, Neely Fuller's Counter Racist Code Show. I am one of the co-hosts. I am Mr. Bobby, and waiting next to me in the bullpen is Professor Gate, and we have a show for you today, being again the 20th of January, 2026. Let me do the usual housekeeping that we have become familiar with. You can support and promote the show by hitting the like button and the share button. To watch this show live, go to YouTube at Produce Justice, Facebook and Instagram at Produce Justice Neely Fuller Jr., and you can also watch the show live at producejustice.com. By the way, a replay of the show is available immediately on all platforms. To get the show on, to share your thoughts, click on the link in the feed, and you will be prompted on what to do next. You can also find the introductions on the website at producejustice.com. Feel free to read a passage from one of Mr. Fuller's books on air for discussion. Now, if you would like to contact us off of the air, send your comments or questions to contact at producejustice.com. To order the books, you can also go to producejustice.com. And I think also there is the limited edition coffee table size leather bound collector's item, a version of the original 1984 code book is now available, which you can get by going to producejustice.com. And they are available on a first come, first served basis. And I don't have the count as to how many there are left, but they are going. And when they're gone, I understand that they will be gone. So get your copy right now so you can have it, put it on your coffee table, share it, talk it, discuss it, think it, all that good stuff. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping items that I have. Don't forget to get into the chat room, and we will read some of your chats. And also, Gate will have a link where you can get on the show and be part of you could be a co-host with us. That's today. He'll tell you more about that as the show proceeds. And now, without further ado, let me introduce and present to others Professor Gate. Professor Gate, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. And as Mr. Fuller would famously say, I am still learning. That professor title does not stop me from learning. We should all be learning. When you come on this show, come with an open mind, come to share your thoughts, come to learn, discuss, challenge. We do not know it all. We don't claim to know it all. Matter of fact, the things that we talk about on this show, what I say, what Mr. Bobby says, these are our own opinions. We read from the code book. We listen to Mr. Fuller's words, watch his videos, and we add our little 2 cents to it. That doesn't mean we're right, doesn't mean we're wrong. Mr. Fuller gave us the right to do so. He coined an acronym called VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. In other words, to all the non-white people out here, we are all victims of this global system, and we all have a right to redress it in our own way. Now, you might not like the way I redress it. I might not like yours. But this is Mr. Fuller's words. He says we all have a right to redress our grievances under this system. And today we're going to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. And by all means, I have dropped the link into the feed. If you want to join the conversation. I see Aaron from Spain warming up over there. We'll get you on in a minute, brother. So come on board if you want to join the conversation. But we are going to talk about Dr. King on the day after the federal holiday, Dr. Martin Luther King Day. Dr. King was born January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the son of a Baptist minister. Married Coretta Scott King, had 4 kids, earned a PhD in theology. Deeply influenced by Christian theology and Gandhian nonviolence. He lived constantly under threats and surveillance. And he was assassinated April 4th, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, at a sanitation workers' strike. There's a lot of discussion about Dr. King. He's been a lightning rod from the left and the right. But for better or worse, there's a holiday in his honor. Many people still don't know what to do on that day. Like, what do you do? Mr. Fuller said we shouldn't be celebrating anything. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start out today. I put the question out here. What did Mr. Fuller think about Dr. Martin Luther King? Now, one thing I said I was going to do more of on this show is to do more listening and less talking. This show is not about me. I don't ever want it to be about me. And today is no exception. I want to hear. So if you want to find out how somebody feels about a particular person or a particular topic, you go back and listen to their words. Now, Mr. Fuller also wrote 3 books. He wrote his original code book back in 1984. He came out with a word guide back in 2010. And in 2016, he wrote the expanded revised edition of the original book. Now, this is my take on it, but I say the code, Mr. Fuller's code and beliefs and concepts were immortalized in his books, in his 3 books. But I'm going to go as far as to say that his actual spoken words are an extension of the code book. He is the author of the books. So as far as I'm concerned, what he says, the words that he speaks, should be given equal weight. Now, one thing I like what Jason Reels said, and he's chiming in early. He said, "Don't follow the personalities, follow the work." He also said, "Follow logic." So grab a quick share. We're gonna listen to this. What Mr. Fuller give you a pretty much a better understanding of what Mr. Fuller actually felt about, how he felt about Dr. Martin Luther King.
All during January, I was listening on various radio stations where I could catch it. One public radio station, and they were playing, I think, all day just about the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Well, Mr. Bobby, it looks like we have the usual suspects going on here. We're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But just in a synopsis of what Mr. Fuller was saying is that he spent most of the month of January, this was back in 2024, listening to the speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King. So this great man, Mr. Neely Fuller, who has his own concepts and beliefs, spent a couple of years ago, these are his exact words, he spent much of the month listening to the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, you can say what you want to about how you felt about Dr. King and how you think Mr. Fuller may have felt about him, but you don't spend an entire month listening to somebody's speech unless you have some type of appreciation for what they have to say. Now, many people have labeled Dr. King as passive because of his nonviolent stance. But we should not confuse nonviolent with passive. Dr. King challenged racism. He challenged economic exploitation, and he challenged war and the military-industrial complex. And so I don't think we should be joining in this effort to sanitize Dr. King's words to fit the narrative of some of the same people who wished for his demise. So when we're saying, well, this guy he was a sellout, it's Uncle Tom, he was too passive. Well, that's the narrative we've been spoon-fed to a large degree. Every year around this time, people trot out the I Have a Dream speech, where he talks about little white boys and little white girls can join hand together and skip up down the road and sing Free at Last. And well, that was just one facet of a very complex individual. Now, I'm not here to tout Dr. King, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to sing his praises. I'm trying to give a more nuanced view. And of course, some of my own personal take of this individual. So what I'm going to try to do also is look at this from a counter-racist viewpoint. And I'm going to try Dr. King's words again. I actually had a speech from Dr. King, probably one that very few people have heard, where he talked about life's blueprint. It kind of gets you into the thinking behind the man. Now, quickly, I'm going to talk about look at Dr. King through the lens of the counter-racist code. And you will find out that there are some areas where Dr. King and Mr. Fuller were very much aligned. They came from different strategic orientations, but they intersected in some important ways. And one way, very important way, is that there was a system analysis and logic for survival. They very much spoke about the system, they analyzed it, and they both talked about logic. Dr. King was more about exposing racism. He talked about the moral clarity. He showed the world the injustice, the hypocrisy, and the violence that's baked into the system. Now, Mr. Fuller, he made no joke about it. White supremacy, racism, that was no mistake. It wasn't something that just happened, that we can moralize away, that we can pray away, that we can march away. According to Mr. Fuller, this system was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. That's to mistreat people, to dominate people. It's built on lies, hypocrisy, and injustice. Dr. King tried to appeal to the conscience of America. And Mr. Fuller pretty much said, this system doesn't have a conscience when you get down to it. There's no conscience to appeal to. It's about raw violence, hypocrisy, lies, and untruths. So today we're not talking about whether Dr. King was right or wrong. But how do we as victims survive in this system? So some common ways some ways that Mr. Fuller and Dr. King were they aligned. Go ahead, Mr. Bobby. Go ahead and join in.
Oh no, I'm just agreeing, with that. I listened to all of most of the Dr. King's speech, and I also take into account with what Mr. Fuller has said, which means that I am still learning, what to do and what not to do, as well as the opinions that some people have and are making on our site. Somebody had mentioned Claudette Colvin, which do you know the story about her, Gate, about Miss Claudette Colvin?
Oh yeah,
she was. Yeah, well, she was before Sally, or rather Sally, in the bus situation.
Before Rosa Parks.
Yeah, before Rosa Parks. I don't know why Sally is on my mind. I don't know if it had anything to do with her color, but she died, I believe it was last week, if I'm not mistaken, because she refused to give up her seat, to a white woman, but she died at the age of 86. But when you look at the things that have happened and are happening, they're happening for a reason, because as Mr. Fuller has said, to alert us that it is designed that way to suppress us. And it has, for the most part. We, as in, part of the original indigenous people of this land, were forced into what they have now. But it's not working for them. And as the show develops, I can give you proof that we as a people will rise, not because Dr. King said it and not because Mr. Fuller has said it, but he has made us alert and aware of what's going to happen, even though when the show began, and as everybody knows, that we are constantly under pressure by, as you stated, Gate, the usual suspects. Why? Because the so-called dominant culture, which is not, they do not want us to know what we are and what has already been promised to us. But we will rise, and again, I have proof of that because I've studied it. I have proof that we will, in spite of all the stuff that you see going on, taking up Denmark, Venezuela, all that. Don't even worry about that. Stay focused on what we are supposed to do, and we will go. Right, AP? Anthony Cross? Oh, yeah. And what's his name, as he told us to call us? Say shot 7? Yeah, no, say shot at 7. Yeah. Say shot at 7, Delbert. Yeah. See, it's all coming together. And later on, if I get a chance, I will give you what I've learned about that and how that will take effect. Not even to worry about it. Go ahead, Gate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you brought up Claudette. Colvin, and it reminds me, and like I said, as a historian, of how everybody, regardless of which side you're on, sometimes you have to bend history. You have to bend the narrative somewhat to fit what you're trying to do. Now, Miss Colvin, she was not, I guess, in the eyes of the civil rights hierarchy, she was not the ideal poster child for the
Right.
bus boycott.
Right.
She was young. I think she may have been an unwed mother. She was dark complexion, so some colorism came into play. And so the handlers said, this cannot be the representation we're trying to put out here. And many people didn't realize that Rosa Parks actually worked for the NAACP. She was
Yeah.
basically sent down there to say, look, let's put you in here as a more of a representative of how that can people can stomach. You're more mature. You got the light complexion, uh, working a nice job, and so these are kind of the games that people play. And sometimes you have to do it. It's done on both sides. Sometimes you have to get your point across. But sometimes we look back through the lens of history. But when we, as the oppressed people, make those kind of moves, then we somewhat lose some of our own the high ground. So we have to be true. And
Yes.
as Mr. Fuller would say, stay on code at all times. And of course, there
Yes.
wasn't a code book back then. But if there had been one, I'm sure Mr. Fuller probably may not have agreed with that move to substitute Ms. Colvin with Rosa Parks. Um, I'm going to try the video again, and if we don't, we're just going to keep moving along. And also, I'm going to get Aaron from Spain on here. So hang on there, Aaron. Matter of fact, let me get Aaron on here now.
Um,
Aaron, welcome
uh,
to the show.
yeah, I would like to just briefly summarize my experience with interacting with Martin Luther King.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough that my father and my mother taught me about Black history globally, and I wrote lots of high school essays about Martin Luther King. I think as I was in my teens, I think I had a different perception. Um, yeah, as a child and as a teenager, because I think once I'd been exposed to Martin Luther King Jr., then Malcolm X, both were quite opposing individuals, and through a very surface level, you have the impression that Martin Luther King was just completely passive, but that's not true. Um, as we know, the usual suspects twist and bend the narrative, and I think often victims of racism, we try to retrospectively look back in history and say what people should have done. But I think given the tools that Martin Luther King had at the time, he did the best that he could. He
Yes.
wasn't a perfect man, but there's a lot of good lessons that you can learn from him. I certainly don't agree with everything that he did. I mean, particularly the Gandhi, his connection to Gandhi because of Gandhi's uh, pure hatred for African people.
Right.
However, I don't have the ability to speak to Martin Luther King, so I don't know if he knew that or if he did know that and thought, well, let me just put that to a side and just focus on peace. So, but I think that we should, as Mr. Fuller said, not necessarily worship somebody, but take some constructive lessons. I mean, I think if you take away your criticisms, a lot of good was done, globally to show that Black people are suffering in the Western Hemisphere. So I think that's where we should kind of frame it. We shouldn't, yeah, I think it's difficult because on one hand, a lot of his tactics were quite extreme. Even to today, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have done the marching and then people spit on me and all these things. But again, everybody's got their own path. I think my preference was probably more like Malcolm X, but I think as I've matured in age, and I'm just wrapping this up because I don't want to take up too much time. I think both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were not too dissimilar. I think the idea was that Malcolm X was an angry black man, but he wasn't towards the end. And I don't think he ever was. And I don't think Martin Luther King was a passive person because I believe his handlers created this idea of softening up the image. And although that I Have a Dream speech is very famous, towards his end, he spoke against integration, or he had a lot of concerns about it, should I say. I'll just leave it like that because I don't want to take up too much of the time.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you. You
Thank
always
you.
bring great insight, and appreciate you from Spain. Folks, that was Aaron from Spain giving his insights on Dr. King. He made some good points. He, like many people, were not fans of Gandhi because Gandhi we found out later on, was a racist. Hold 1 second. Go ahead, Mr. Bobby. I need to do something quickly on the technical side of it.
Okay. I was going to say the word that you spoke before Aaron from Spain got on. Truth. Speak, think truth, thought, speak truth, speaking, and then act it out. It leads to a righteous standing. And when I had spoken before, as you had given me the platform, to speak, and I said that I have proof of that. Let me just say this, we talked about the truth. Well, Martin Luther King, when he, in his speech, and Aaron just mentioned it, I Have a Dream speech, and we remember certain excerpts from that. And one of the things that Martin Luther King said, being prophetic, he said that we as a people shall get to the promised land. Those weren't just words that he spoke. They were not. And I'm getting ready to give you the proof. That's the third time I've said that. And going back, if you will, particularly from the Ethiopian Bible, which has all 88 books in it, and not the 66 that were put in by the Europeans that most of us go by. In that particular situation, when you look in the book of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, you look at the first 15 verses, Gates, it showed us what Yahweh, our Father, taught us what to do. Okay, but then after verse 14, at verse 15 to 68, Yahweh said the curses of what would happen to us. If you look at it objectively, you will see that we are living right in that. And that looks like a prophecy of doom. But, and this is what the important part, we as a people shall get to the promised land. Look what he said in chapter 30, verses 1 through 14. This was all prophesied that it would happen. And he has that reserved for us when we do what? When we go back to him. When we go back to that belief that Yahweh, the creator, has specifically done this. When we stop and repent for the things that we have done, not following him, and affected all these things that are happening to us even now with what Venezuela and Greenland and all these wars and all that stuff. You have the promise from Yahweh, from, as you said earlier, Gate, truth. This is not a lie. Truth. You look that up as the scripture that I had mentioned. You look at it and see what is promised to us. And for those of you that want further proof, in addition, 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people who are called by my name, so forth. Not being biblical, but that is the truth. That is the truth. So this is why we don't put Martin Luther King or even Mr. Fuller, as he said, not on a pedestal, but we remember the prophetic words that they said. We as a people will get there. We will get there. Go ahead, Gabe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bobby. And I think that many of the people probably in the listening audience, they don't lean that much on religion, but we have to understand that Dr. King was a spiritual and religious leader. And so when he was speaking about getting to the promised land, he is indeed speaking of what has been prophesied in his vision, in his dream.
Right.
Now, like I say, there are many people who are say, look, the religion that he follows was handed down. We received that religion in slavery. And many people who follow that religion are just really following something that has been put in place to tame us. And that's many people that, when we talk about sometimes the difference between Malcolm and Dr. King and Marcus Garvey, one of the things that have turned many people away from Dr. King was his adherence to the religion of the slave masters. So many people just have a problem with that. That goes back again to what some of the things that Mr. Fuller, I look at some of the things where Mr. Fuller and Dr. King were aligned. I look at Dr. King, even with any, whether you agree with his strong religious beliefs, you have to believe that he was a fighter for justice. That's one thing that's beyond debate. That's not debatable. He put his life on the line for justice. He was a fighter. He constantly identified this system. And it wasn't just for prejudice or daily microaggressions and things like this. This system was actually put in place for all the wrong reasons, this system of racism. And he and Mr. Fuller had that in common. Mr. Fuller identified this system also, this system of racism, as a global system for the purpose of domination. There was, in some areas, there was almost no daylight between some of the teachings of Dr. King, as we learn from his speeches, his writings, and that of Mr. Fuller and what we call the code. Both believe that violence is a tool of white supremacy. Dr. King lived that out. He was a stark example of that truth. He was actually stricken down by an assassin's bullet as a glaring example of the violence that comes with racism and this system. Then some people talk about, well, the protesters of violence, the people who are, the racists have a way of turning things around. We understand their racism. We see it. We see the hypocrisy. But one thing, the tools that the racists use would turn around and say that you're violent when you're merely protesting, like we're seeing in places like Minneapolis. Dr. King said, violence is the voice of the unheard. If you continue to ignore people, continue to deny them their rights, then violence is the result. Mr. Fuller also talked about violence, talked about war, economic deprivation in his 9 areas of activity. So many comments. We're going to keep moving here. We're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. We're talking about the King holiday. Somebody in the feed said he was killed because he was a communist, not because he was black. Well, like that matters. He was killed. Whether he was communist, Marxist, whatever you want to call him, the fact is he was killed fighting for justice. We add these labels to people. Sometimes it can be deflecting. It deflects from the mission. And sometimes we use these fairy tale versions of the truth. Like everything communist is good and everything that's democratic is bad. Those are distractions. You shouldn't have killed him, whatever he was. Now, we're talking about Dr. King today. This is the Counter-Racist Code Show, Mr. Fuller's Counter-Racist Code Show. And what I'm going to do quickly, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to once again tackle this question about people labeling him this passive, malleable tool of the system. Now, what I want you to do for a minute before I do that, we want to do some introspection. We're gonna do some mirror looking. I do not ascribe to everything that Dr. King believed or everything that he felt. We parted ways on quite a few issues, but that's on anybody. I don't ascribe to everything Mr. Neely Fuller has said. But those differences should not make us lose sight of our common goal of dismantling a system that has historically been violent, unjust, and favoring one race of people over another. There's individual racism. There's institutional racism. There's systemic racism. It's all bad. It should not matter whether you are Black, white, Latino, Asian, or whatever we classify as racist. Racism is bad. The world is a better place. United States is a better country when we operate in a system of justice versus injustice. And from that standpoint, I appreciate what Dr. King attempted to do. I think he totally underestimated the viciousness of this system. I think he underestimated that you can live in this system. You can try to dismantle this system, but this system will literally kill you before it decides to give up the rights and privileges that come with it. Now, Dr. King, like you say, was not this passive individual that just laid down and let things be. He engaged economic warfare, as we saw with the Montgomery bus boycott. There was a massive withdrawal from the economic apparatus. Lasted 381 days. And it cost the city and that bus company millions of dollars. Nonviolence does not mean non-disruption. Say what you want. I'm just telling you some of the things that Dr. King did that we may consider. We see him as this passive person who laid down for the system. And I will always come back with this response. And some people get mad at me for saying this, but what are you doing? It's easy to sit on the sidelines and criticize. He shouldn't have done this. And it's always easy to look at things through the lens of hindsight. They say hindsight has 20/20 vision. I actually believe that Dr. King thought his system would work at the time, but the longer he was in it, the more he realized my path is not going to bring us to the promised land. In fact, he had a conversation, I think it was Harry Belafonte or somebody along that line, and he said, I feel like I've integrated my people into a burning building. Even Dr. King was coming around to realize this system is really vicious. And that the only way to survive and to get to that promised land, you have to dismantle the system itself. Dr. King was also willing to break the law if he thought those laws were unjust. He said you have a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. We're seeing that come up now in current things that are happening. If you put a law out here and you know it's unjust, that it's going to marginalize and harm people, you have a moral responsibility to disobey those unjust laws, according to Dr. King. From his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, where he talked about the people who were acquiescing and the so-called white liberals. He had a problem. Disobedience is intentional confrontation. When you disobey the law, when you march, when you protest, when you're in their face, that is not passive, particularly in this system that has a history of lynching and killing. That is not a passive person. Dr. King engaged in several mass marches without permits. He filled the jails with protesters, people who were protesting against this system. He targeted commerce. And he knew that violence would be the result. He was strategic, whether you approved of his strategy or not. He was going for the reaction. He wanted to expose the viciousness of the system. Another thing that Dr. King did, he opposed, he challenged white moderates. As a matter of fact, white liberals than he was on the racists in many cases. He said one of the greatest stumbling blocks to the Negro, the term that was used at the time, was the white moderate, because they wanted to take this gradual path to justice. He exposed these false allies because he demanded immediate action. And this is one of the areas that may have gotten him his undoing, was his open condemnation of U.S. militarism and capitalism. All of these things I'm saying right now is supposed to be from a guy who's supposed to be passive, who many people will sit around and say, I wouldn't have done that. I would have taken a different approach. Yes. In hindsight, yes. But you're talking about a system that enslaved people, that has eliminated, put people on reservations. We're talking about the Trail of Tears. We're talking about a system that has no moral compass. Yet, Dr. King did the best he could. I'm just speaking what I see within the limits of what he had. Dr. King probably lived as long as he did, which was only 39 years, because of his approach. If Dr. King had come out with shotguns and Molotov cocktails, and he wouldn't have made it 39 years. So it's easy to say what we could have done, what he should have done, if you're not willing to lay your life on the line. Dr. King said in 1967, the war in Vietnam crossed the line. He said the United States was the greatest purveyor of violence in the history of the world. He linked racism, militarism, and capitalism as interlocking systems. We taught in the history books about how we are going off to these wars to fight for freedom and liberty, when in reality it's for resources, oil, land, for the capitalist. Dr. King saw right through it. Now, of course, when he took this position, he was coming down toward the end of his life. He talked about this three-headed monster of capitalism, militarism, and racism. The more he talked about it, the more donors he lost. The more he talked about it, the more political protection he lost. The more he talked about it, the more he was surveilled. Now, you have to remember, too, Dr. King was a young man. This man was in his 20s and 30s. And many of his critics, some of us today, we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, years of experience, endless hindsight. And once again, I am not here as a protector of Dr. Martin Luther King, but I do like to tell the entire story. Dr. King was not a perfect man. He had some personal challenges. He did some things that no person of the cloth or husband or father should be proud of. But let who without sin cast the first stone. And we're going to come down, we're going to wrap this up. And I did have some video, so because if you don't have the video, you have to listen to me. And Mr. Bobby. Dr. King, in his final years, he shifted his focus to economic justice. he actually planned a mass occupation of the city of Washington, D.C. with an effort called the Poor People's Campaign. He wanted to be guaranteed equal income, jobs, housing. And he was of the mind that it will not be business as usual. He was going to disrupt some things. When you start talking about people's pocketbooks, people's wallets, you get people's attention. This was not symbolic. This was a direct threat to the economic order. This put Dr. King in the crosshairs. Once again, Dr. King was a young man. To some of us, he was young enough to be our son. Sometimes we get comfortable in our middle class lifestyle, our good jobs, our businesses. We've done okay, we've done well. Failing to realize that many of those luxuries have come at the expense of people like Dr. King. And it's even if his system, if his tactics were not to your liking or what you would have chosen to do, he did something. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have Chat GPT. He was constantly under the threat of being killed, but yet he continued. I'm not a fan of integration. I think we should have stuck with our own economic strategy, no matter how many times they burn down our communities, no matter how many Rosewoods or Tulsas or Wilmingtons we have. I think we should have stuck with it. And if we'd gone that route, who knows if we would even be here today if we just kept popping back up every time we got knocked down. We're seeing a backlash right now. We've seen 300,000 non-white women lose their livelihood over the past year. We've seen the dismantling of DEI. We're seeing the middle class in the non-white community under attack. The racists never stop. Dr. King knew this. And this is something that many people didn't understand or accept. That Dr. King did not condemn the people who chose a different route than he did. He didn't condemn the urban riots or the people who were fighting for justice or the people who were in pain. He didn't come out there and say, I'm against you. He put it in context. Once again, he said rioting is the language of the unheard. He didn't condone violence, but he understood violence. He shifted the blame to the system that caused the violence. Dr. King, as I wrap up here, he accepted death as the likely outcome of his actions and his belief. Can you imagine being in your 30s with a wife and 4 kids, constantly receiving bomb threats, constantly being called on the phone? Who do you go to? In his final years, Dr. King felt isolated. The religious establishment, many in the religious establishment, had turned their backs on him. Many of the people who were in the civil rights movement said he was too mild. The military industrial complex, the economic system, the political system had pretty much abandoned him. But he continued organizing anyway. He refused to retreat. And he pretty much predicted his own assassination by saying, I may not get there with you. So there's a difference between being passive and deliberate retreat. He rejected violence, but he did not reject pressure. He rejected hate, but not conflict. He rejected chaos, but not disruption. He appealed to the conscience while simultaneously constantly challenging the power structure. So I'm going to leave it there. I see a lot of comments in the feed. Now, when we put this show up on YouTube, you can get the show on YouTube, Facebook. You can also go to the homepage, producejustice.com. I didn't plan to talk this much today. I was going to spend most of the day listening to these videos of Dr. King and Neely Fuller, Mr. Neely Fuller. And maybe when I turn sometimes when I cut the video off and stop using as much of the resources, we can play them at the end of the show. So if you'll stick around, I'll try it one more time when we close down the microphone here. In summary, I'm going to say Dr. King had his pluses, his minuses. There is no perfect person. There is no savior. I would say instead of spending precious energy criticizing a fellow victim, let's do something. We have militaries in our cities right now. We have a government that seems to be working a commander-in-chief with unchecked power. We don't have to go back to 1968, 1961, 1956 to say what I would have done if I was back there. What are you doing now? One thing you can do, we can support the businesses in our communities. We can pool our resources. We can stop fighting each other. We can listen to each other. Understand that everyone has a say in how we move forward. Nobody's going to agree with you 100%. Nobody knows everything. You don't know it all. I don't know it all. Your way is one way. out of many ways. They don't all have to be in conflict. Sometimes you may agree with somebody only 50% of the time, then take that 50% and work with it. Purism, absolutism is not the way. I'm just going to tell you. Mr. Bobby.
Yes, sir.
Any final words?
Yeah, you said it earlier in the program. Focus in on truth. That's very prophetic. Focus in on the truth. And as Lawrence Fishburne said in the movie School Days, wake up. Wake up. You wake up by following the truth. And that is TSA. Think truth, speak truth, and then act it out. One more thing. Somebody asked, where can you purchase that Ethiopian Bible? Either at your local black bookstore or the usual places where books are at. You can ask for it. Or if not, you can ask Google. Speak truth. Operate in the truth. And everything that we have discussed will come into focus, because you will realize once you speak truth, act truth, and be truth, that it is within you that the Creator Yahweh has put in us. We got to be exposed to it. ProduceJustice.com.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. And I will say this also. When I speak, I do try to speak truth as I know it. I don't get on here to push my opinion on anybody. I try to call it like I see it. But all of us, we have to see through this lens that has been placed over our eyes. And so we see it through our experiences. My experience may be different than yours, but I'm not going to knock your opinion the way you see it. I may challenge it. I may not like it, but it's your opinion. And if it's going to get us closer to justice, go for it. That's going to wrap it up today. Thank you for tuning in to Neely Fuller's Counter Racist Code Show. I'm Gate. Thank you, Mr. Bobby.
If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time.